Nick Chubb was one of the NFL's most dominant and consistent running backs. Before 2023, he had recorded 4 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, earned 4 straight Pro Bowl selections, and averaged more than 5 yards per carry. Then during a Monday Night Football game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, one devastating hit changed the direction of his career. Chubb suffered extensive damage to his left knee. He had already been reconstructed once before. He required 2 operations, missed more than a year, and was never quite able to reproduce his pre-injury explosiveness. Now that Chubb has announced his retirement at age 30, let's examine exactly how the injury occurred, which structures were damaged, how it was treated, and the impact it ultimately had on the remainder of his NFL career. So the injury occurred on September 18, 2023 during the second quarter of Cleveland's Week 2 game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Chubb took a handoff near the goal line, ran through the middle of the Steelers' defense. As he was being brought down from above, safety Minka Fitzpatrick came in low and gave a very abrupt tackle to that left knee. Chubb's left foot, though, was planted and his knee was trapped underneath, and the combined force of the 2 defenders, that created a violent combination of compression, rotation, and abnormal angulation through that knee, and that joint visibly displaced before Chubb immediately grabbed his leg. He was then carted off the field and quickly ruled out for the remainder of the season. This was not the typical non-contact ACL injury we often see when an athlete plants and changes his direction. It was a high-energy contact injury in which multiple forces were applied to the knee at the same time. But to understand the mechanism, think of Chubb's foot as being temporarily fixed on the ground here, somewhere below the Steelers defender. You see the rest of his body is continuing to move forward, and at that same time we're having an external force from Fitzpatrick coming from to this left knee here, all of which are producing a significant amount of stress and different types of forces through this left knee. First, there was a valgus force, meaning the knee was forced inward relative to the hip and the foot. That places a significant amount of stress on that medial or inner side of that knee. Second, there was a rotational component, when the foot was planted but the thigh and lower leg rotate in different direction. That cruciate ligament and the meniscus can be definitely overloaded. Finally, the force caused abnormal translation between the femur and tibia. In other words, the 2 major bones forming the knee were driven beyond the range that the stabilizing ligaments could safely control. So although the injury has often been described publicly as resembling a knee dislocation, the Browns confirmed surgical findings were damage to the medial capsule, medial collateral ligament, meniscus, and anterior cruciate ligament. That distinction is important. The visual appearance can suggest a major displacement, but we should describe the official diagnosis based on the structures that were actually repaired. So there are 4 major structures involved for this injury for Nick Chubb. First, we're going to take a look at the medial capsule, which is this capsule surrounding the knee joint here. The medial capsule is going to be referring to this inner side capsule here. It is a fibrous envelope surrounding that knee joint, and it helps contain the joint, contributes its stability, and supports the surrounding ligaments. Damage to the medial capsule is indicated that the force did not simply stretch one ligament, it disrupted the broader border area along the inside of the knee. If we start to remove the fibrous layer of the medial capsule, we're going to start to look at the other structures that were involved. We have our medial collateral ligament seen here. This, or the MCL, runs along the inside of the knee. It connects the femur to the tibia, and it helps prevent the knee from collapsing inward. Because Chubb's knee was subjected to a major valgus force, the MCL was severely damaged and required surgical repair. An isolated MCL injury can often heal without surgery, but Chubb did not have an isolated injury. His MCL was damaged, occurred alongside injuries to the capsule, meniscus, and ACL, making the knee significantly less stable. The next ligament we're going to take a look at is the ACL, or anterior cruciate ligament. It is located in the center of the knee, and its primary limits forward movement of the tibia relative to the femur, and also plays a major role in rotational stability. A running back relies on the ACL when planting, cutting, absorbing contact, and rapidly changing direction. Chubb's ACL was damaged badly enough that it ultimately required reconstruction during a second operation. And then finally, if we're going to remove the femur here, we'll take a look from an aerial view of the meniscus that is seen between the femur and the tibia. The menisci are 2 pieces of fibrocartilage that are crescent shaped, seen here. They do help distribute force, absorb shock, improve joint stability, and protect the articular cartilage covering the bones. Meniscus damage is particularly important for a running back. Every cut, acceleration, and collision produce substantial compressive forces through the knee. Preserving as much functional meniscus as possible is critical because losing meniscal tissue can increase contact pressure and contribute to degenerative changes later in life. So for Chubb, he underwent his first operation late in September of 2023. During that procedure, the surgical team repaired the medial capsule, MCL, and meniscus. Then in November, Chubb underwent a second operation to reconstruct the ACL. Browns later confirmed both procedures were successful, so why not repair everything at once? With the severe multi-structural injury, the knee can become extremely swollen, stiff, and inflamed. The tissues along the medial side may need to be stabilized first, while the swelling decreases and range of motion begins to improve. So attempting ACL reconstruction in a severely irritated and immobile knee can really increase the risk of arthrofibrosis, and that is just like an excessive amount of scar tissue formation that can severely restrict the motion. Staging the procedure gave the medial structures and meniscus time to begin healing before the ACL reconstruction. The ACL reconstruction most likely involved replacing the damaged ligament with a tendon graft. The graft then needed months to incorporate into the bone tunnel, remodel, and then gradually tolerate increasing loads. So recovery from an isolated ACL reconstruction commonly takes approximately 9 to 12 months before the return to a high-level competition. However, Chubb's was way more complicated because this was not an isolated ACL tear. It involved multiple structures, 2 separate operations, and a knee that had already sustained a catastrophic injury in college. Chubb returned against the Cincinnati Bengals on October 20th, 2024, 398 days after the original injury, and scored a touchdown in his first game back. Returning at all after such extensive damage was an incredible achievement. However, returning to the field and returning to a pre-injury performance level are 2 very different milestones. Unfortunately, though, Chubb's comeback season did end early when he did fracture his foot against the Kansas City Chiefs in December of 2024. That injury was separate from the reconstructed knee, but it interrupted an already difficult attempt to regain rhythm and conditioning. After the season, Cleveland did move on, and Chubb did sign a 1-year contract with the Houston Texans. And then Chubb announced his retirement just in August 2026, a few days ago. He finished his career with 7,349 rushing yards, 54 rushing touchdowns, 4 Pro Bowl selections, and a remarkable career average of exactly 5 yards per carry. However, before the Pittsburgh injury, Chubb was still at the height of his career. From 2019 to 2022, he recorded 4 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. In his first 2 games of 2023, he was averaging 6.1 yards per carry. It would be overly simplistic to say that the knee injury was the only reason the career ended. Running backs already face short career windows, and Chubb was approaching age 30. Nick Chubb's injury definitely demonstrated how destructive a high-energy multi-ligament injury can be. The combination of MCL, medial capsule, meniscus, and ACL damage required 2 surgeries and more than a year of rehabilitation. Even after the ligaments were surgically stabilized, restoring the strength, speed, confidence, and rapid force production needed by an NFL running back was an enormous challenge. Chubb never fully returned to his previous statistical level, but his ability to play again on the same knee that he had already been reconstructed after a major college injury remains one of the most impressive comebacks in recent NFL history. The injury may have shortened his time as an elite running back, but it does not erase what he accomplished. He retired as a 4-time Pro Bowler, Cleveland's 3rd leading rusher, and one of the only handful of high-volume running backs in NFL history to average at least 5 yards per carry. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments down below, and thank you so much for watching.